Welcome to the roller coaster of midlife. I'm your host, Lucy Q. Now, today we're going to explore why self-love is far from selfish and understand the deep-rooted connection between self-trust and intuition. Joining me today is Jasmin MacKinnon, a remarkable woman who embodies the essence of blossoming into one's divine empowered wisdom. For over 2 decades, she has been the guiding force behind countless individuals finding clarity and healing in her bustling wellness studio. Not only is she a celebrated empowerment and spiritual coach, but she is a Reiki master, energy healer, and the power behind the quintessential energy healing method. Welcome, Jasmin.
Hello, thank you so much. You make it sound so good.
Well, they're really important topics that you're touching on here, and we're going to start off with self-love. And for me, self-love and self-care go hand in hand. And more importantly, so many of us women, and I've been that person as well, mistakenly thought that self-care or focusing on yourself was selfish. How dare you take time away from your family, your kids, your to-do list, all of these things. How dare you take time? Can you maybe share, your thoughts on that and why self-love is so important to us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it's interesting, that I love that we're starting with self-love. Because for me, self-love is self-care, which is self-trust, which I believe feeds into our intuitive force that we have. And it's for women, but it's for everybody. The interesting thing about as a woman, we have these programs that we're raised with, and the idea of, it being selfish to take care of yourself. And there's actually 3 archetypes that I tend to lean on when I'm working with my clients. And the archetypes are mother energy or parent energy, or child energy, or daughter energy, if we're going to speak about women. And then there's woman energy or adult energy. So I'll speak on behalf of women. The mother energy, what you're just saying about the self-love and being selfish, it actually is a program that the mother energy, I'm not saying mothers in general, this is any woman that has these traits. And the traits are the idea of being like selfless and always giving and always, these expectations and having to show up and maybe being the martyr, self-sacrifice. And if we do anything that remotely looks selfish, there's judgment and it gets perpetuated even within women, like other women will be like, oh, who do they think they are? Look at them all doing things for themselves. So we need to really recognize that it's not selfish. And this is just something we were taught. So when we go into the self love aspect, again, that doesn't even look like what people imagine self-love to be. When you think of, self-love or self-care, it's bubble baths and whatever, like spa treatments and reading a book and sitting by fire. Yes, it's all those things, but it's more than that. It's, the self-love and self-care is also creating boundaries, like learning how to say no when you mean it instead of saying yes. Self-love is having more empowered communication or assertive communication instead of being passive aggressive or aggressive. Learning how to speak from, your truth. That's another form of self-love and self-care. So there's different ways that we can adopt the self-love, and it doesn't look always like the bubble baths or what people think it is, right? So yeah.
It's really interesting, the 3 archetypes that you mentioned, because I often speak to how many of us Gen X women move very quickly from being daughter to wife to mother. That transition happens for many of us in a matter of just a few years.
Yeah.
And within that process, we adopt these labels.
Yeah.
That we, whether they're societal labels or the ones that we put upon ourselves, we adopt these labels and we completely lose all sense of who we really are beyond those, titles of wife and mother.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I think we lose our sense of self, and we don't know, like, it's all new, right? As soon as you step into the mother role, and this is not only about mothers, but even if you're raised to kind of be in the role of mother energy, because sometimes that's just a lot of this is just passed down, right? It's just the program repeating itself and whatever you grew up with, and the beliefs in the family system, and the external forces of like how you're supposed to be a mother and what that looks like, and the pressure, and you're just like, I was just a person and now I have this extra human and this
Well,
little human.
and that was it, is, somewhere I saw, it was a caption or something, and they said, you know, you're raised as a mother as you raised your first child, because you have no idea what it's like to be a mother. So you're becoming a mother. So you're sort of raising yourself as a mother while you're raising your own child. You're
It's
sort
so
of,
true.
it's a lot to work through. And I don't think we ever took the time just to stop and acknowledge what a heavy transition that is. And I think, you take that and you combine that with, that loss of self
Yeah.
throughout all of our parenting years. It's no wonder that women hit that midpoint in their life and they stop and look around and go, what the is
Beep,
going
beep,
on
beep, beep.
here? Yeah. And people classify it as a midlife crisis. I do not like that term. I think there are way too many negative connotations associated with it, and
Yeah.
it doesn't really get to the root of the problem. And I think the root of the problem is that, and I'm not trying to discount what men go through. We're talking about us as women.
Right.
And I think we lose that sense of self. We lose that sense of purpose beyond these roles that we're playing. And I think that all just feeds into a point. And, by our midlife years, we then get blessed with this shitstorm of hormones that we have to deal with. And it all just becomes too much. And that's when we sort of pull the handbrake and we go, okay,
Yes.
something has got to change.
Yes. And so, and I know we previously talked, but I love what you said about the term midlife crisis, because I actually created a program called the Midlife Consciousness. And it is about, like, let's look at where you are and maybe how you got here, and what archetypes are at play. And, and what are some more empowered questions we can ask ourselves to shift us out of this mother energy, or even the child energy. Because if we're going to talk about archetypes, like I said, the mother energy is kind of like the martyr, the wallflower, the worrywart, the Puritan, the perfectionist, and then we have the child energy, which is more victim, lone wolf, even addictive behaviors. Like, it's more selfish, where mother energy is more selfless. And we live in these, because sometimes when we're feeling squeezed, or we're feeling the pressure of life and our roles and whatever, trying to please everybody or trying to just do all the things, when we're squeezed, it's almost like this reaction that comes out of us, because this is not who we maybe wish to be, or it's almost like a trigger in a way, where we fall into these roles even harder, because it's almost like our go-to, it's our protection. And so the consciousness aspect is learning to ask yourself healthier, more empowered questions, learning what boundaries mean, and like even how to, not even what they mean, but how to create one. And so that's really hard for people, and how to do things that do support your self-care, and do things that create self-trust. And even the self-trust part, because I think it all goes hand in hand. I think self-trust, self-love, self-care, and intuition is all this one beautiful thing that can help move us forward and kind of be more empowered in our day-to-day, and trust what we hear and know and feel. So there's different things you can do to support yourself in building trust with yourself, but a lot of people don't even know how to get there, because they've never been taught. There's no tools that they were raised with. So I know I kind of went on a tangent there, but
no, but there are so many voids that I think it's the times that we're living in, the energies that are going on in our world right now, is that these things are coming to the surface for a reason. And I call it I don't like the term midlife crisis. I call it midlife meltdown, because I truly
Mm,
believe that in my experience, everything had to melt down so that I
yeah.
can form it into something new. And
Yeah.
and you sort of talk about, that consciousness, like understanding how you got here, why you got here, taking that ownership in the choices that we made,
Exactly.
and then making the choices, having the opportunity to make those different choices moving forward. It's all this
Exactly.
opportunity to, not throw out what was, but just to form it into something new. And part of that, and maybe you can speak a little bit more towards this, is that when you do take a step back and you step into self-love and self-care, for me, this inner, I don't know what to call it, maybe it's the intuition, that sort of inner being started to grow more.
Mhm.
And then I found myself, gravitating more towards things, more spiritual things, and that sort of intuition and things. You know, in your experience, how do you find that all fits together?
Um, yeah, so I would say, as you tap more into your the self-love, self-care, but it's really, again, it's a lot of, it sounds selfish, but it's not. There's self-centered and then there's selfish. This is like a healthy form of being selfish. So when I say, the self-care, it's also so, recognizing your self-worth and self-respect, and recognizing your patterns. And the more you start tuning into your own patterns, and when I talk about mother energy or even daughter energy or child energy, a lot of times we don't want to be connected to it. So what I mean by that, just say, someone says you're a worry wart and you're like, no, I'm not, like you reject it, or that you're a victim. No, I'm not, but if you can really invite all these different parts of you to bring yourself to more wholeness and accept those parts that maybe you don't love or are less desirable. um when we banish those parts of ourselves, that's when we're separate, that's when we're kind of fragmented. And when we can bring it all together and have these conversations with these parts of us, or invite them to the table, so to speak, we get more centered, more grounded, more whole, more self-love. And then I find as you're softer with yourself and you're more compassionate towards yourself, and you can forgive yourself in certain ways, whether it's things you didn't do, um, the guilt, shame aspect, there's all these different emotions that come to play when, especially when we're feeling squeezed in life in whatever way. But when we get more grounded in who we are as a whole, that's when you're going to have that clearer channel for intuition. That's, that self-care, that softness, that compassion. You're going to open yourself more up to self-trust. And then the trust is when you can connect to your inner wisdom, when you can connect to your higher self, when you can connect to spirit or creator, whomever you believe in or resonate with. I just think, you get out of your head more and you get more into the body and more into your energy. And you're going to find there's a lot of feedback, there's a lot of information at our fingertips, but we're so busy with the bullshit that we can't access it. So, and if you're not, either doing your own work, whether it's self-help books or reading or therapy or a mentor or a coach or whatever, like therapist, whatever, sometimes we're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But it is this work in progress, trying to figure out, like, okay, where am I, what's getting me stuck, where am I sticky? And if you're able to, like, love those parts of you that you may have rejected, you're going to find more information comes. The more you love yourself, the more divine love's going to come towards you.
And certainly when it came to my journey, is that I spent so much time being busy
Mm-hmm.
and not taking those pauses.
That's busy bee. That's mother energy.
Yeah, that you do have that tendency to take those aspects of yourself that you don't like, make them into villains, hide them away, lock them in the closet. But
Yeah.
as I found out, they come back.
Yeah.
And I always use the analogy that, if you don't listen to these things, it starts off as a whisper.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets louder and it gets louder. And then finally, for me, and in my case, and it happens to a lot of people, is you don't pay attention until you get hit over the head with a 2x4. and
Yeah.
you have no choice but to deal with it. And a lot of the time, that equates to being at rock bottom. And
Yeah.
that's certainly where I found myself. And that's when I had no choice
Mm-hmm.
but to dig down and start to work on some of these inner things that I haven't been paying attention to, and figure out, okay, if this is not what I want, if these are the things I don't like about myself, well, what is it that I do want for myself?
Yes.
And go on that journey. And it's been a journey of, been about 6 years for me.
That's awesome. Good for you, though.
But that's sort of the process that you have to go through. But I always say, when somebody goes, well, 6 years, I'm like, well, I was living those 6 years anyways. They may as well be good years as opposed to
Yeah.
really shitty ones. But I've gone from living in, and I think this is what a lot of us are doing, is we're so busy living in that outer world.
Mm.
And that's what the busyness is, and that's what the materialism is, and that's what all of those things are. But when you start to practice that self-love and turn inwards, and you start focusing on your inner world, that's when, like you say, everything opens up. That's when you can connect deeper. That's where you really tune into your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's parts of me that people don't like. That's okay. I don't care.
Right.
I can
Yeah.
sit
And
here
even
now and
letting
go,
that go, that's huge, right? That's
I know.
huge.
And it's really, really cool when you get to that place in your life and you're like, I like me. I really like me. I like hanging out with me. But, as for most of my life, the first half of my life, I didn't live that way. And I
Right.
don't think most of us ever live our lives that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, and it is an ongoing journey. And, I don't think it's an interesting thing because, there's this journey to like self-healing, and it's ongoing. But there's also this perspective too of loving yourself as you are, where you are, because,
Yes.
it's happening in tandem at the same time. It has to work together. Oh, I'll love myself once I get to this point. No, you got it. That's part of the work, is loving yourself now. And as you heal and evolve and you know better and you do better, you're going to love yourself there too. And you're going to, love the past versions of you, but just know that you've grown, and be proud of yourself. But yeah, it all is internal. There's a lot of numbing out, and that's a survival technique, right? Numbing out, don't want to feel, don't want to deal, whatever it is, right? We numb out in different ways, whether it's being busy or, all the different things that we do to distract ourselves, whether it's, social media, TV, drinking, smoking,
Fine.
eating, blah, blah, blah,
Fine.
You caught me. Yeah. You know,
Oh yeah, full on guilty. Like, don't worry. But
and that's human too, right? Like that's part of our human
and,
experiences.
and that's it's really funny because we do have to acknowledge that we have our human self and our spiritual self.
Yeah.
And as you grow in your spiritual self and you grow those connections, I find myself saying, kind of my spiritual self giggling because it's like, oh, Lucy's doing something because that's her human self.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
You can
Like,
kind of acknowledge, you're like, oh yeah, that's because she's human now.
right. Yeah. And I think it's actually a beautiful thing when you recognize your awareness, or having more awareness of your human experience, and having some compassion in that. And, if you're feeling, say, like shame, or you're feeling hooked about something, I don't know, guilt, something, right? And you can feel that hook, like, oh, something's hooking me right now. And instead of like dropping into this whole heavy story of, the lack of self-worth or whatever it is, or something's wrong with me, or I did something bad, it's like, oh, I'm having my human experience. Oh, something affected me, and I got to kind of look at what that is. And, this doesn't make me a terrible person. I'm just having a response to this experience. And I just need to kind of be aware and look at it a little deeper.
And that's it, is you dig in when you react in that human way. That's when you get to, when you sort of chill out and you step back, that's when you get to go, okay, why did I do that? What sparked me? What set me off? What does that relate to? Does that go back to something that happened to me as a kid? And
Yeah.
that's that inner work that you're always journeying through. is it,
Yeah.
it never completely goes. There's no like, aha, I've made it.
Yeah, yeah. There's no like finish
No.
line. Because life happens and we are always evolving and growing, and yeah, little things pop up from our past. They're just like, oh, and even what you said earlier around you didn't always love yourself. Like you really enjoy yourself now, you enjoy your company, you can appreciate who you are. And I agree with what you said. A lot of people don't, they don't for a long time until they either have a rock bottom, hit midlife and start questioning everything and just like, what the hell, am I happy? Who am I? I've lost myself. And I've been a massage therapist for I don't know, about 25 years now anyway. And I've done all different kinds of treatments with people, and there was definitely, and this is probably what prompted this course that I wrote, because the group of people, like the age group that would come see me, would be between say 35 and say 60, but there was like this chunk of men and women where there was like this midlife meltdown, as you called it. I like that term. And I could just, like, you could see it coming. I'd be treating somebody for 10 years, started treating them when they're say 28, and now they're 38, and I see something stirring, right? They're like, it really reflect, I always have conversations with my clients, and that's where it really started showing up, was like me treating my clients and having these conversations and seeing like, this is a common, we're not alone in this.
No.
This is a thing. We're not alone in this. And yeah, there comes a point in our life where we're just like, what the hell am I doing? And, am I happy? And am I honoring myself? Like recognizing like, we're not here for, we'll only remember this life, usually. If we're in the past lives.
I was gonna say that's another episode.
Yeah. But this is the life that we have, and how am I living it? And I think we start asking ourselves those harder questions, and do we want to do anything about it? And I think that's that tipping point, or that cusp that we, I call it, like jumping the threshold. Like, do I step into wanting more for me? And if I do, what does that mean? Does that make me selfish? Does that make me irresponsible? Is that good? Is this good for my children to witness? You're going to ask yourself all these questions around, stepping in and loving yourself and building self-trust, and hopefully you can do it without the guilt,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now for our listeners that are nodding their heads, seeing themselves at that place of being stuck, unsure, feeling like it's all too much, do you have some first steps that somebody can take to start to, explore self-love and that self-trust and reconnect with their inner selves?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of these things are practices, practices that we have to bring into our life. And so there's the willing to be willing to do the work, and then there's willing to do the work. So it's kind of like thinking about doing it. So if you've been thinking about it and it's been on your mind, like I need a shift and I don't know how, there's things you can do as a practice. And one is a self-trust muscle. How do you build more self-trust with yourself? And that will hopefully open you up to more inner guidance or inner wisdom, or intuition. And there's things like sticking to your own promises. It's honoring yourself and not breaking promises to yourself. That's one thing you can do to start building self-trust, because it's so easy to say, okay, I'm going to go for a walk tomorrow, and then you don't, and then you feel bad, and then there's a whole story. Okay, well, I need to honor this thing for myself. So set yourself up to honor the promises you make to yourself, and make sure they're reasonable too with what you're able to do or you're capable of doing at that point in time. Like, oh, I'm going to get in shape. And then you're like, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. No, you're not. Don't do that to yourself, right? So just really stick to your own promises, but make them tangible, right? So that's one thing. One is avoiding negative people that bring you down, people that talk shit, people that are, they're maybe even self-centered or gossipy, or, like people that, I don't know, make you not feel good about yourself, or just not feel great around them. So that's something you can do. Definitely being mindful of your inner dialogue. You think about the looping thoughts you might have, or things you might say to yourself, or something goes wrong. What's your instinct? Do you call yourself stupid? Do you go into that negative dialogue? So really be aware, like, and a lot of this is awareness. That's the practice. It's becoming more aware of your go-tos. And yeah, so if you find that you can try to reframe the things you say to yourself and not have that negative inner dialogue. Like, these are things you would never say to a little kid or your daughter or your son, these things that we say to ourselves. So why do we say it to ourselves? We're just hurting our inner child, essentially, the way we speak to ourselves sometimes, right? So really trying to have more positive, loving, compassionate words in our mind. What are other things? Connect to your inner needs, like really listen to what you need. That's another way of building self-trust. What do I need right now? I'm actually kind of hungry. Instead of like blowing off that you're hungry, then get up and eat something. Or, oh my God, I'm really tired. It's okay to have a nap. Don't feel bad. Like, just our basic inner needs. We need to honor that, because sometimes we always not always, but we can tend to neglect ourselves in the basic things. And communication, that's another way of kind of giving you a bunch, sorry, but
Oh no, it's all good, because
yeah.
people have to start somewhere, and they have to
Yeah.
start with something that, I'm not going to say easy, but is easier,
Yeah. So these are
to
like
start with.
the
And
tangible, like,
and negative self-talk, I think that's a big one, because I think I was listening to a podcast or something this morning, and I think they made reference to, for the most part, 80% of what we say to ourselves is negative.
mm,
And
like,
if
how
you sort
horrible
of,
is that?
what's that?
How horrible is that,
I
right?
know, I
Mm-hmm.
know. And when you sort of look at the power of our words, and I think
Yeah.
that in the podcast, they were talking about the placebo effect. And I
Mm-hmm.
think they referenced like our negative self-talk as the nocebo effect.
Mm.
Is it like, if a fake sugar pill can suddenly cure you,
Yeah.
then what does like a negative aspect do to you?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting too, like around the negative self-talk, because I think his name's Dr. Moto. Have you heard about these
Oh,
experiences?
water dude.
Yeah, the water dude.
I can never remember his name. I always just think of water dude.
I want to say Moto, but I could be
I
wrong.
think so. He's
Okay.
Japanese.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they do experiments where they, say affirmations to different water, like cups of water, and then they crystallize them and they show you the shapes that they form. And, the negative or the hateful or exposure to something like low energy, or, they're all distorted crystals. And then the love and the compassion and the prayers, and those crystals are all very beautifully shaped and very intricate geometry, type of crystals. So it's interesting, we're made up of water, like we're primarily made up of water and energy. And, what's the impact on ourselves, even, on our mind, on our psyche, on our energy. The way we speak to ourselves really matters. And then you said about, our words carry power. There's a frequency in not only the words we use, but the energy and the intention behind the words we use. So that impacts us on a spiritual level as well. So yeah, the self-dialogue is no joke.
It's probably one of, if you can only do one thing right now for yourself, I would suggest just catch yourself
Yeah.
being mean to yourself,
Yeah.
because just acknowledging that you're doing it is the first step. Because once you create that awareness, then maybe next time you can, when you realize you've said something negative to yourself, then you can turn it around
Yeah.
and say something positive to yourself. It takes time.
Yeah.
I still do it. I mean, I think we all still do. It's part of being human.
Right. And it takes time to acknowledge it, like you said, and to become more aware, because it's such an old muscle that you flex. Talk about a practice. You've been practicing talking shit for your whole life. Now I got to practice, being nice and kind. And it also takes practice to reframe your language, even like your go-to is like, you idiot, instead of like, oh, I'm human, I messed up. Okay, I'll do better next time, or I'll be more aware next time. It's finding the language
Yeah.
even for yourself. But I think that's that's a great place to start, is just becoming aware of your thoughts and, that inner dialogue. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Jasmin, as we wrap up today, do you have
Mm-hmm.
any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
What would I like to say around this? I would say really try to find compassion for yourself in moments where you feel squeezed or you're having these low level thoughts. And maybe like what we said earlier about, like, think about if this were a little child, how would you speak to them? Because sometimes that's what we need. So try to think of, if you're going to love yourself, maybe speak to yourself in a way that you would need to hear when you were little, because maybe that's what was missing at some point in your life. So just really try to be kind and compassionate to maybe that inner person, that inner child that you have. And just be gentle. There's no need to we don't need to self-lash. We don't need to lash ourselves all the time. We get enough of it externally. Let's start there and just try to be compassionate and love yourself, because you'll find more good stuff is going to come through spirit, through externally, through relationships, but mainly on how you feel inside. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. Now, to connect with Jasmin, please check out the show notes. I will have all of her links in there. And my goal for the roller coaster of midlife is to empower women like you to thrive in this amazing chapter of our lives. So go on, embrace the adventure, and start rocking midlife like the badass that you are. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend, because our greatest power is in our community. Don't forget to visit my website, therollercoasterpodcast.com, and click on Start Here to get your free audio course, 3 steps to go from hot mess to badass and start rocking midlife. Thank you, my listeners, for choosing to join us. And Jasmin, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. This was great.
And until next time, keep riding the roller coaster and embracing the midlife adventure.